on details of the president's dinner with James Comey. And it says, quote, James Comey better hope that there are no tapes of our conversations before he starts leaking to the press. And that led to nearly 6 weeks of the White House spinning its wheels.
Did President Trump record his conversations with former FBI Director Comey?
The president has nothing further to add on that.
He said that you had no idea whether or not there was a taping system in the Oval Office. Could you try to find out?
Sure, I'll try to look under the couches.
Do tapes exist of your conversations with him?
Well, I'll tell you about that maybe sometime in the very near future.
He'll let us know. Everybody has to wait and see.
The president made clear in the Rose Garden last week that he would have an announcement shortly.
I think the president is going to address that in the week ahead.
The president has said that he will make an announcement on this.
Boy. Finally, the president put his staff out of their misery today with this tweet, quote, with all the recently reported electronic surveillance, intercepts, unmasking, illegal leaking of information, I have no idea whether there are tapes or recordings of my conversations with James Comey, but I did not make and do not have any such recordings. So why play this game? A game that backfired pretty spectacularly. Here to discuss, CNN contributor Michael D'Antonio, the author of The Truth About Trump. So let's get to the truth about Trump. The fact is, the truth is that the president and his White House took 41 days to finally say he did not record his conversations with James Comey. Why this dog and pony show? Why do such a thing, Michael?
Well, you know, the first thing that comes to mind for me is that it's a lot easier than being the president. You know, if you go out there and issue these tweets and you get everybody talking about it, and then you let Mitch McConnell carry the ball for you in the Senate and watch while everybody scrambles to try and figure out what's going on, it's more amusing. And this is one of the things that one of the president's folks said about it today, was that he was amused by this. Now, it does a terrible disservice to Jim Comey. I mean, nobody thought of him as dishonest until the president suggested, well, maybe he is, because there could be tapes. Let's see if he lies or not. And it does a great disservice to the country because it erodes our confidence in the president. And then imagine what the security community is thinking right now. Are they supposed to be pleased that the president suggested that even now maybe they're recording something? Because that is the word that came out later on today, is, well, the spin is the president doesn't know that there's not any recordings because perhaps the so-called deep state is doing that to him now.
So the deep state would have access to the Oval Office still, and I guess the Secret Service and the security at the White House would not have swept the Oval Office for bugs and recording devices, so he wouldn't. Okay, that makes complete sense. That was sarcasm.
Well, and Don, this is a terrible thing for us to now have to worry about whether we can trust our own intelligence agencies. You were talking about the problem of conspiracy theories in the previous segment, and I don't think Americans need to be encouraged to have belief in conspiracies when the Russians have already disrupted our election and tried to sow concern about whether we can trust anything. But again, this is the guy who went around during the campaign saying the system is rigged. Yeah. So there's just so much chaos and chaff being thrown in the air that it's really hard for any of us to know what's true.
Well, it's interesting to me because you know, we talk about so much about love of country and all of that, and if you love your country, you don't want to deceive. I'm not saying that he is just intentionally doing it, but why would someone do that? You know, love of country, and then deceive people, and then think it's amusing, and then put out conspiracy theories. It's just a question for me, a couple questions. But Michael, so the White House denies that the president was playing a game, but you say President Trump made the false claim because he understands the power of merely suggesting recordings exist. Explain that.
Well, you know, he did this to Tim O'Brien, who's often on CNN talking about his experience with Trump, the businessman. Donald Trump said, well, there may be tapes of my encounters with you, Tim. And then they went to court to litigate a case about his book. In the end, Tim O'Brien and his publisher prevailed, but the whole purpose was to scare the writer and scare the publisher and somehow suggest that there was something some evidence of wrongdoing on his part. You know, when I met with then candidate Trump 5 or 6 different times, I brought my own recorder, I brought a witness, and he brought a recorder, because this game of is this exchange recorded or not is something every journalist in New York City knows that Donald Trump, the businessman, used to play.
Well, that's as a businessman, but when you're the President of the United States, it's a whole different, it's not a game anymore. You know, this is the national security of the country, you know, whether or not there are recordings in the White House, that goes, I mean, the American people have a right to know about that, and it would also, it can either back up what he says, or it can deny what he said. And that's what brought Nixon down, tapes. So I think it's important to the country.
Right.
It's not amusing.
And the strange thing is we still don't know.
Yeah.
Now he said, I don't possess any tapes, I didn't record anything, but he's not saying that recordings don't exist. And that's like me saying that I didn't see Godzilla on my way to the studio tonight, but that doesn't mean he's not going to be out there when I
right, or that
go
he doesn't
home.
exist. So I have to ask you, a Republican who spoke with the president this week tells CNN that President Trump has been amused at all the obsessing over this. Is this something to be amused about again?
It absolutely is not amusing to me, and I don't think it's amusing to most Americans. I'm still waiting for Donald Trump to become my president, as well as the president of his base. And it's all well and good to say I'm playing to this 38% who will never abandon me, and I understand that. Politics is to some degree team sport. But he's also the President of the United States, and I want him to succeed. I want the country to succeed. And I don't see that he's making that effort to reassure the 62% who have doubts about him.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Thank you, Michael D'Antonio. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Don.